My name is Glenn Cummins, and I'm the director of the Center for Communication Research here in the College of Media and Communication. In terms of rooms, we have two psychophysiology labs, two eye tracking labs. We have a continuous response theater, and then a focus group room, and two large experimental labs. So the eye tracking lab is a really good tool for measuring visual attention to specific elements within a message. For years, people have been interested in attention to television, attention to media in general, and we've had a lot of really crude ways to measure attention. We can simply gauge how many times the eyes are on screen versus looking at something else in a room. We can measure how long somebody's watching something. But the benefit of eye tracking is that it lets us look at specifically from moment to moment what a person is looking at on a screen. So we know not just that they're watching television, but we can know specifically what are they looking at on television. Or it could be a website, an advertisement, a newspaper story. So we can track the specific message elements that attract their attention. It's not invasive. Somebody basically sits down at a typical computer, and located just below that computer is a small housing with a series of cameras that are looking at a participant's eye. And what those cameras do is they shine an infrared light that is basically reflected off the back of the eye. And the technology basically uses that reflection and does a lot of really quick geometry to figure out where on the screen somebody's looking. Before they get started, we do a calibration procedure where we measure their gaze at different points along the screen. Once we have those measurements, then we can reliably assess throughout the duration of their exposure, specifically where they're looking on the screen. We have one computer basically records from second to second, actually records hundreds of times a second, exactly where somebody's looking on the screen. So it captures that information, and that data is fed to a second computer that is actually controlling the stimulus presentation. So if you're watching a movie, it's presenting that movie, and also it's gathering real-time data from moment to moment where the eye is, and it synchronizes that gaze data with specific parts of a television commercial, movie, whatever the person's looking at. So it's able to figure out, at what specific moment something happens in a stimulus and where the eye is at that specific moment. So we have two psychophysiology labs, and that's becoming an increasingly popular way of measuring how people respond to television, media messages in general. The reason that's so beneficial is that for years we've relied on self-report to figure out how people respond to media messages. And that's great, and it's a very easy way to do that. It's a very efficient way to measure how somebody responds to a message, but it's not always the most accurate way to measure how somebody's responding. And I say that because how we think we are responding may be different than how our bodies are actually responding to a message. So our psychophysiology labs let us track, again, moment to moment, how somebody is responding to any different type of message stimulus we want to present them. So we can measure their heart rate, we can measure their skin conductance to see how much they're sweating in response to a stimulus. We can also measure facial muscle activation to see whether or not somebody is smiling or frowning in response to a message. Again, these are all very useful tools for measuring response that we may not even be aware of while we're watching a program. So we bring a participant into our lab, and we have them sit down in a really comfy chair. And it is a nice, fairly comfortable environment for them to sit down and watch a television program or movie or whatever we want them to see. We have them sit in this comfortable chair just a few feet away from a large LCD panel. While they're sitting there, we have a series of electrodes that we can hook up to their hands, their arms, their face. And that's always the most awkward part of the study is you have to wire somebody up and then you tell them, all right, pretend this is a perfectly natural thing for you to be doing. While they're hooked up to our technology, the signals are fed into another room where an experimenter is controlling the presentation of the stimulus and monitoring what their bodies are doing in response to whatever that program may be. One of the things we want to do here in the CCR is try and have a diversity of different ways to study audiences and study how audiences respond to messages. So obviously we've got eye tracking, we've got psychophysiology rooms that let us look how people are responding to messages. But we also have to acknowledge that that's not the most naturalistic way for somebody to watch a television program. So we're creating a living room environment that will allow us to observe in a somewhat naturalistic setting how somebody interacts with media technology, what they're doing while they watch television and maybe surf the web at the same time on a laptop or a tablet PC, that sort of thing. So we put them in a comfortable environment and let them behave as they naturally would in their own living room. While they're doing that, we can observe what they're doing, we can track their attention to different media technologies that they have at their disposal. So it really gives us a better sense of how people are looking at media messages, again, in a lot of different ways. So we have a room that was originally slated to be just a classroom, and we realized it was the perfect space to use for our Ortec continuous response hardware. So what that technology lets us do is we bring about 30 people in at a time and seat them in a little small tiered theater. They can sit down and comfortably watch, again, whatever program we want them to see. It can be a television commercial, it can be a presidential debate, it could be a television program, whatever we want them to see. While they're watching that, they hold a small handheld controller with a dial on it, and they can use that dial to indicate their liking or disliking of a television commercial. If they're watching a debate, they can say that candidate A is winning or candidate B is performing better in the debate. So we can track this throughout the stimulus presentation, again, to see how changes occur over time as the program unfolds. So we have a wireless controller that each of the participants in the lab would hold. The signals from that wireless controller are picked up by a couple different responders that are going to be mounted in the ceiling of this classroom. And those controllers, the monitors that pick up on those signals, basically communicate with a laptop computer that is controlling the data collection process, and it collects and aggregates all that data, and then we export that for statistical analysis later on. The other interesting thing that gives us is it generates a video overlay. So you can actually monitor in real time a line that is indicating how the group is responding to a message. So if the line is going up, that means that they're liking the message. If we see the line going down, then obviously that's expressing some sort of disapproval to what they're seeing on the television. We have a focus group room here in our new facility, and we've always had a space where we did focus groups, and it was a good space and did what we needed it to. One of the benefits of being in our new home here in the Media and Communication building is that we were able to go in and design the space to be exactly what we needed for conducting focus groups. So we have a space with some tables that we can move around depending on the needs of this particular focus group. We have observation cameras mounted on the ceilings. We can see exactly what's going on with the different participants in the group. We have microphones in the ceilings. We can record the audio and video of what's being said. And then we can also observe that in a small room that's adjacent to the focus group facility, where the researcher can watch through a one-way mirror the participants in that room. They can see what's going on. We can record what's going on and reposition those cameras on different participants depending on what's being said and what's going on. If we're working with an external client, they could sit in that observation room and they could have specific things that they want to look at. Maybe in one focus group they hear a lot of things said, and in advance of our second focus group they could tell the moderator, hey, I want you to focus more on X, Y, Z. This person in this focus group said this. In the next session, maybe you could ask about this particular topic. So it really gives us a perfect space for doing research, both to support faculty here in the college as well as some of the external clients we might work with.